All right. So the secret to losing fat.
You gonna explain it?
Yeah, let's do it. So I'm gonna show this chart here.
Okay.
So imagine this is a time scale, 1 to 12 hours.
Okay.
So you got to look at it this way. This is not exact. This is in a ballpark because everybody's different. Everybody absorbs sugar and has a different insulin response, but we'll get a general idea. So imagine we eat some sugar. We'll use red for sugar. Or you know what? Light blue for sugar. So we'll use light blue.
Now, is this sugar or any carbohydrate?
You know what? Bread actually spikes or has more sugar than sugar. So let's use carbohydrates.
Okay.
Because bread also activates in your system really quick, just like sugar.
Rice?
Sure, vegetables. Yeah, rice, absolutely.
Can I get some
yeah,
rice on my oatmeal?
exactly. Yeah, oatmeal and rice. There you go. So imagine we just had a nice amount of bread or rice, and our sugars just spiked up. Okay. Once our sugars spike up, what happens naturally is we have insulin. Insulin comes in and goes, "Hey, there's too much sugar. Let's get some insulin in here." As soon as you have that insulin, and by the way, these charts are not related to one. It just kind of shows a bump in your levels. Okay. So as soon as you get that insulin in your system, your sugar dies off pretty quickly. Okay.
Because it's regulating the
Yep.
blood sugar.
Yeah, absolutely. And as soon as that sugar dies off, also your energy kind of dies off too. But we have this insulin in our system. The problem is the insulin does not die off as fast as the sugar. It takes a long time for the insulin to get
Here's a question for you.
absorbed by your system. Yes.
So we know that sugar goes up pretty quick.
Okay.
And I know you explained to them that those lines, they're not necessarily correlating. It's not like a
Exactly.
1-to-1 ratio.
Absolutely.
But does your insulin go up quickly? Or because like insulin dies off for a while,
Yes.
does it
No.
take time to catch the sugar?
It spikes up pretty quickly. It doesn't. Yeah. No.
Okay, so sugar spikes up pretty quick.
So does insulin. Insulin, your body just excretes insulin.
Right. And then the insulin like puts the fire out.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then it just kind of hangs out like
Like the hose is still dripping.
yeah, exactly. The like
Okay.
the firemen put out the fire, but they just hang out waiting for something to happen.
Right.
Right. And okay, so that was an excellent question. So all right, so now we have, let's say 3 hours, it could be an hour, it could be 5 hours, it's different for everybody. Now we have this gap right here. This gap is the gap of misery, I call it. Why I call this misery? Because your sugar levels ran out. Now your body thinks it's hungry. Why it's hungry? Because you have insulin in your system. What does that mean? Insulin is the gateway to fat storage. As long as you have this block of insulin here, right? This is where your body will never absorb its own fat. Well, it's done with the sugars. That's where it's using its energy sources, energy sources from sugar. Now it has no energy sources. I mean, it's going to deplete your muscle energy sources, your liver, everything. And once it's done, that you still have insulin in your body, you're super hungry, right? When you're hungry, it's depleting every sugar source or energy source, carbohydrate source in your body, and you're miserable. Once the insulin runs out, then you start getting into what we call ketosis. So ketosis starts here. Once you're in ketosis, that's the only way your body is going to deplete fat.
So I can't just run forever and ever?
Well, hold on. That's an excellent question. Because when you run, your sugar depletes quicker, but so does your what's it called? Let's say you eat a bunch of sugar, right? Your running is going to absorb that, and your insulin is not going to spike as high. So your insulin is maybe might spike this high and it'll run out a lot quicker.
Okay.
But also, there's other ways to mitigate this insulin spike. If you do heavy lifting before you eat any carbohydrates, technically your sugar should do kind of like this, right? Instead of doing this, or maybe like, let's say instead of doing this, your sugar will do this because you started or you did heavy weights. So now your insulin's not going to spike as high and it's going to die off pretty quickly. That's also another hack to alleviate insulin. So remember, insulin, when we have insulin spikes, takes a long time for it to come down. And also it creates inflammation. It creates, foggy brain, everything. Insulin is how can I say it? Almost something that distorts your body. Insulin is not something, at least I believe, this is my idea, my understanding. Insulin is not supposed to be in your system all the time. Okay? So now let's see what happens throughout the day. I'm going to go, let's say you got your cereal breakfast, your oatmeal, boom, you spike your sugar level. And it came down, you're hungry again. Lunch comes around, boom, you spike, you're eating, Subway sandwich with all that bread. All right, boom. And then dinner comes around, you eat your pizza or whatever other carbohydrate you want. Boom. All right, there's your sugar spikes throughout the day. Maybe you had snack here. You had another snack here. You got a snack before bed. All right, so those are sugar spikes. Let's see what's happening with insulin then. So your insulin comes up. Starts falling down, you're hungry, you eat a snack, boom, your insulin's back up again. Your lunches came around, you got another little snack. Your dinner came around, got another snack, and it finally depletes throughout the night. You wake up being hungry, which is fine, kind of normal. You're in pretty much fasting mode. And then, you have breakfast, which is, you're breaking your fast. So what happens throughout the day? Your entire day, your body is filled with insulin. Again, insulin causes all sorts of havoc in your body, but the main one is it's a gateway to fat storage. During this time, your body will never absorb fat as energy because it needs to be in ketosis to do so. It does at night for healthy people. Right? This is somebody, I would say this rough chart here is somebody in a healthy state of life. Somebody that's younger, haven't had any issues. So now let's see what happens when your body becomes insulin resistant. And when you have any fat on you that's excess, your body is in insulin resistance. So this is a normal insulin spike, right? If you ate once a day. Now, what happens if you have the same sugar breakfast and you're insulin resistant? Instead of here, your body needs a lot more insulin. It's going to go here. Why? Because all your cells in your body do not reciprocate or accept insulin in the same way. They're resistant to insulin. So now instead of it taking this much, it needs this much. And guess what? It's going to take this much longer. So now the gap is pretty much double. So instead of taking this much, now it takes all this time for your body to deplete of insulin. So now your body is doing double the havoc of having all that excess insulin. And again, insulin creates havoc in your body. So that is my understanding of what insulin does and how to almost hack your body into what's it called? Losing fat.
Okay.
You have to have no insulin in your body for your body to use fat stores. And what is like our number one step on how to not have insulin in our body? Not eat carbs. Carbs equals insulin equals insulin equals inflammation, and so on and so forth. And people do this their whole lifetime, and all these problems stem from that.
So maybe take a minute and explain the difference between what has happened between chart A and chart B in your example. Why is a person now all of a sudden needing that much insulin? What has happened?
That is an excellent question. So, in our lifetimes, for example, I'm going to use me again. This is kind of my understanding, my idea, my thoughts about insulin and how insulin works and how, how can I say it? How our body reacts to it. So I started drinking soda and eating Snicker bars, at 7. And my body's been reacting to that with releasing insulin all its life, excess insulin. Again, I don't think our body's meant to have so much insulin. And over that time, my cells just stop reacting to insulin because it's an overdose of insulin. We got overdosed insulin and our body stop resisting or stop reacting to that same amount because it just gets used to it. It's like accepts this is normal now. For me to fight the sugar, I need to have even more insulin.
So you're saying it's kind of like a drug addict who just needs more and more to get
I think exactly what it is. Our bodies are addicted to insulin. That's a very good point.
Or it's not even necessarily, I mean, maybe that it's addicted, but at a certain level, somebody who's recovered from those types of things.
Sure.
We call that you've built up your tolerance.
Yeah.
So it's like,
okay.
I haven't had a drink in a zillion years at this point. And if I were to have like a beer, I would totally feel it. It would just be like,
yeah,
wow.
Your tolerance, like me, I don't drink alcohol. And if I ever try something like a little sip, I feel it right away.
Right.
It was like, wow.
And there was a time where I could literally just drink beer like all day long. And
spiking your insulin.
Well, spiking my insulin, but
it's a good analogy.
And it would take me a lot of alcohol to really get a good buzz. It would just like so much more than it would never take.
That's a very good point too. Yeah, basically our body needs so much more insulin.
Right.
And what's the problem with that? That's okay, fine. Your body needs more insulin. The problem of that is it takes so much longer. Now throughout my sleep, my insulin hasn't probably depleted because I have so much insulin in my system. Yes, when we measure our blood sugar levels, they're normal.
Right.
That's what everybody measures. Like you go to a doctor, measure your blood sugar level, it's normal. Because your insulin's double in your system, putting that fire out of all that sugar. And why does it double? Again, because your cells are not reacting to it. That's what we call insulin resistance. And this insulin resistance is probably epidemic in our current environment in the United States of America, since 50% of people are obese.
The interesting thing that was brought to my attention by the book you recommended, Why We Get Sick, that I think is so critical in this time in our society, is understanding that while insulin's role in driving the blood sugar down is one of its functions, insulin has a role in the whole body. So when you find somebody who, like myself, was probably very insulin resistant and probably still am, like,
it might take years for you to recover from something like that, if at all.
So I can only imagine that I was the person who was producing just a tremendous amount of insulin to cope with the demands of just eating healthy. Okay,
eating the standard diet.
But my point is that what I learned off that book you recommended was that the insulin's driving a lot of other factors. It's not just preventing you from burning fat off. And it's not only preventing you from burning fat off because you're not burning fat itself. So one thing is the way it affects the adrenal glands and promotes cortisol, which is stress. Because another thing that will stop you from burning fat is being too stressed out, whether you have sugar in your system or not. Too much cortisol in your system and you'll stop burning fat.
So what you're saying is Insulin's not just some, how can I say, like
It's not a one-trick pony.
yeah, one trick pony. This is a gateway to fat.
And it's not just out there handling sugar.
Just that one thing,
Right.
right? So insulin is pretty darn important in our system, if not like one of the most important.
And there's times where we want to be able to have an insulin response. And I think it's important to mention, it's like if you were to eat a bunch of sugar, you would really want insulin to do its job.
It has to, yeah, exactly.
Right.
You're gonna die if it doesn't.
Sugar would literally become poison in us
exactly.
if insulin didn't do what it does. But when insulin rises, it does a lot of other things. And bodybuilders have known about stuff like this for a long time. That's why they've used insulin hacks to grow bigger muscles and do all kinds of weird things.
Sure, because insulin, again, is kind of important in your system and how it reacts with muscle building, with energy, again, fat, with everything in your system.
But I just find it really interesting as we are moving forward in a society that has more and more anxiety, stress, ADHD, depression, and all these other mental things. I can't help but ask the question, is the insulin the primary driver behind all of these problems that I'm seeing in society?
Well, I mean, we do the math, right? We have a society that's a high carb society.
Right.
We have all these issues. We know that a high carb diet leads to insulin, elevated insulin, and leads to insulin resistance. Your cells don't react to insulin the same way anymore.
Right.
So that math, when you add those together, then it's like, okay, carbs, a high carb diet is our current result is from a high carb diet. So that's kind of where it leads. I mean, maybe we're missing some points.
Well, I think we're missing some. I think the topic is as broad and as wide as you want to go, but
sure,
radio
waves.
we see a lot of other cultures other than America, like Italian or French or people that have a ton of these things in their diet and their lifestyle, but they also have other things that you already kind of mentioned that balance these things out. Because I know in other European countries, people walk, ride their bike, they work outside all the time. They tend to stay to a more natural circadian rhythm, meaning they don't stay up late on their phone as much. They're outside when it gets dark. They tend to migrate towards going to bed. So they're not eating like things super late into the evening, and they're also not eating quite as, you've seen the labels of food from our country versus other countries. It is not the same level of processed food. And even when they are eating a large meal of pasta in one of those other countries, I have to imagine that there's like a total picture of their lifestyle that's more framed to work with that. They walk. They get up in the morning. Maybe they walk to work instead of drive a car for an hour or something.
Which I would say everything equates to how it affects insulin.
Right. Right, because the point of all those other activities, whether it's going to bed on time, whether it's walking after you eat dinner, or just being more active in general.
Or how many snacks you eat, how much, when you eat.
Right. I also think that's a difference in other countries too, because I have a friend who grew up in Austria, and she was telling me that one of the biggest differences over here is portion sizes. You don't go,
That spike, and like in my chart, if you're eating sugar, is going to be a lot higher. You're going to excrete a lot more insulin in portion sizes.
Right. Because I'm sure if you eat a small quarter cup of rice, it's not the same as eating 2 cups of rice.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, that spike's going to be different. The insulin excretion is going to be different. But I really did like your analogy that you said the other day about the garbage dump. How our body, that's right. A perfect analogy for insulin resistance.
It was just another analogy for tolerance levels. When you are exposed and people who especially old ladies in the past who would wear way too much perfume, that was why they were doing it. It wasn't because they wanted to be offensive when they walked outside the door wearing too much perfume.
Yeah, right.
They just can't smell it anymore. They spray it on their body every day. And this has nothing to do with whether perfume and cologne is good or bad for you. This is merely, somebody puts cologne on themselves every day and eventually they can't smell it as much and they like the way it smells. And so they put a little bit more on so that they can smell it. And then in a year or two, they're taking a shower in it just so that they can get a whiff.
Yep.
While the rest of the world has not gone nose blind to them and they walk by and it's like,
woo, buddy, and that happens all the time. That's funny, yeah. Because people walk by, like let's say you're in a crowded places, somebody walks by and you're like, what was that? That's what our bodies are doing.
It is.
Or basically, you eat tons of sugar and your body's not reacting, and then or your cells are not reacting to the insulin that you excreted, and then it needs to excrete more and more and more, and then at some point you become diabetic because you don't have enough insulin in your system. Your cells are not reacting to the insulin you have.
Right,
already.
and you couldn't even produce enough if.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because your insulin is so calcified. Well, how can we call this? Insulin calcification or insulin resistant calcification.
No, I don't know about calcified, but they just
no, they're not.
The term insulin resistance. It's when you think about it, it's pretty self-explanatory. The cells in your body have become resistant, and it just takes more signal to get the same job done that it once upon time took.
Yeah. Okay, and I think that wraps up our illustration, my little chart, and how I understand it, of how our insulin works and how to, I would say that called the secret of losing fat is not having any insulin in your system. And to not have insulin, you don't eat carbs.
And I really like how you phrased that. It's not about losing weight. It's literally about losing excess fat. It's like losing fat.
Yeah, because at some point your body, like, naturally in a healthy state knows how much fat it needs to have on it, and we all have excess fat. Like anybody, like if you have excess fat, if you're like over a certain body percentage of fat, you have excess fat.
Right.
I don't know what that is. I would say maybe ask a carnivore that actually eats strict like beef, eggs, butter, and salt,
just beef.
Just beef, and test their body fat, and that's the proper amount of body fat. Yeah, but if it's like anything over 20% for a man, I think it's way excess.
All right.
With that, I think that's it.
Should thank everybody for tuning in to another one of our rants.
Hopefully you enjoyed it and learned something from it.
Don't forget to like and subscribe.